Welcome to Leaving Nothing to Chance, your go-to podcast where we bring you insights from some of the most influential voices in small business and personal development. Each week, we dive deep into conversations with top thought leaders, authors, and business moguls from around the world, sharing their secrets to success and strategies for growth. Tune in for exclusive content that will inspire, motivate, and equip you to take your journey to the next level. This is Leaving Nothing to Chance.
It's my privilege to have on our show today Dr. Ravi Iyer. And Dr. Iyer, amongst other things, has a background in biochemistry, molecular biology. He's a physician, he's a scientist, he's an inventor, he's an author, 40 plus years of serving mankind. He's authored 3 books that we'll talk a little bit about today. And also he's been a 3-time TEDx speaker, which that alone puts you in some rarefied air, Doctor. Welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure.
So let's start at the top. Let's talk a little bit about the 3 TEDx talks on the 3 pillars of performance. And what are these 3 pillars of performance?
It started with the 3 pillars of performance actually applies to whether you're an individual or an organization. It's focus, connection, and community. Before you engage with anyone, you first have to engage with yourself. And if you don't know what are the things that you really stand for, what are the things that are your grounding narratives or principles, if you're not able to focus on them as the driving mantra of your life, it's impossible to get anything done to begin with. So without that focus, it's you're pretty much dead in the water before you start. The next part about it is just having focus alone on something is meaningless unless you're able to connect with other people. No person can accomplish anything if they plan to accomplish it all by themselves and alone with no other recipient of their accomplishment. People become wonderful or great only when they are in connection with a group of people. You cannot be wonderful or great in a desert island by yourself. So the essence of connection is absolutely important. And to connect, you need to be able to engage with the essence of the person with whom you're connecting. When when 2 people connect, then there is communion. When there is communion, heart begins to speak to heart, and there is communication. So communication begins with connection, and the intermediary medium by which communication happens is communion. When there is communication in the space of connection, a community is born. To recap, when there is connection, there is communion. When there's communion, heart speaks to heart, there is communication, and a community is born. A community is not a bunch of bodies occupying the same space. A community is a bunch of hearts speaking the same speech. So the third element of the pillars of performance is community, but it is linked to connection, and connection is linked to focus. So that's the trinity of performance.
And I think that would work for any organization, right?
It'll work for individuals, it'll work for teams, it'll work for large organizations, small organizations, it'll work for a village, it'll work for a city, it'll work for a nation. When Martin Luther King stands on the stage in front of Lincoln's statue and speaks out to the mall, "I have a dream," he was focused on his mission and he was connecting with 100,000 hearts. And 100,000 hearts experienced the same dream that Martin Luther King had. And there you had a community automatically. The minute that that heart-to-heart connection happened, a community becomes created.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about this, Doc. How much effort does it require for an individual or a team to acquire these skills? Because those three pillars are everything that you just described.
Yes.
How do they make that leap, especially if they're not functioning that way today?
The first thing is to understand, to make darkness go away in a room, it does not require time. All you have to do is switch on a light and immediately darkness disappears. Transformation occurs outside space and time. Transformation really does not require an instant. It happens, they say, it happens faster than the beat of a single honeybee's wing or the blink of an eyelash. There's an ancient tale in India of a king called Janaka. And King Janaka placed a question before his court of all his knowledgeable, wise men. He said that if somebody can teach me the essence of being, of what is the essence of human being, if somebody can teach me that, I'll give them half my kingdom. And none of the scholars were able to communicate to Janaka the essence of human being, the wondrous space of creativity. And there came finally a dwarf walked into his court. His name was Ashtavakra, and Ashtavakra declared that, yes, I can teach you. So he said, I want you to understand that there is a counter promise to this statement. If you are unable to teach me, you lose your head. He said, yeah, I understand. Just make sure that you have the papers drawn up for half the kingdom tomorrow. He says, okay. I said, tomorrow morning, I would request your majesty to meet me at the stable, at the royal stables. Before you go for a ride, I'll meet you there and I'll teach you there. Before this, Ashtavakra said, it takes no time to learn this. It's just, you can learn it in an instant. And he said, you got to prove this. So he meets him in the royal stable the next morning. And Ashtavakra stands before the king's horse and holds his hand like a stirrup, like a step for the king to put his foot in and raise himself up into the horse. And the king lifts his foot up and puts it into Ashtavakra's palm, intending to lever himself up. And he goes into a trance. The instant his foot touches Ashtavakra's hand, he goes into a trance. And he remains standing there with one foot raised up, rooted in a trance. And Ashtavakra steps away and waits. They wait the whole morning, they wait the whole afternoon until sunset is coming, and Ashtavakra gently taps the king, and the king comes out of the trance. And he says, I have been rooted in the being of human being for the last 12 hours. Glory be to you. He says, now do you believe me that transformation takes only an instant? So that's the story of transformation. To answer your question, how long does it take? Once you establish connection, the time is only to establish the connection. Once you establish connection, when I stand before an audience or a group, I conduct them through an exercise, and at the end of it, they experience a taste of connection. And at that connection, they get it at that moment. And once from that point onwards, the only time it takes is for them to develop the strategies where they can repeatedly re-enter the space of connection at will. That requires a little practice, but doesn't take that long. Typically, a 3-hour session is enough to give them a taste. A weekend is enough to give them the skills, and then a month of practice is enough to get them really good at it. By the end of a year, they are masters. if they do the practice like the way I describe it.
So let's talk a little bit about results. Now, you've been doing this for a long time, 40 years. You've worked with all sorts of different groups and people, but let's talk about some of the results where you've seen that change in either in people or in leadership, be it corporate or community leadership. What have been some of the results?
The biggest thing is the impact they experience for themselves in the relationships they have either at home or at work. And because of that, they all uniformly, within about a month to 2 months of engaging in the method, they start reporting 200, 300 to 500% improvement. I really mean 500%. And that's actually a conservative. Most people go back and they are different people. They engage differently. They see the world differently. They see opportunity differently. And let me explain this a little further. Most people live lives, I call it the not enough life. They live life as if the resources that sustain them, that nourish them, that reward them, and that validate them are in perpetual short supply. They believe and they live as if that the things that can really make life meaningful for them are likely to vanish. They don't exist all the time, or when they come into being, they have to grab at it before it gets taken away from it. Somebody else takes it, or it dies out, or it decays, or something like that. So they live this life of perpetual hustle, like as if they really are not in command of the appearance of the things that they need most in their life. They live as if they live what I call the accidental life. They live as if they are standing there waiting for life to manifest favorably for them. That's the first part. The second part is because they are not confident that life will manifest favorably for them, they are constantly manipulating, constantly scheming, trying to engineer life to come to their position favorably. Or they are constantly trying to figure out what's likely to happen in the next 5 minutes and position themselves such that they can be in a position of advantage. This kind of existence is an animal existence. Animals behave this way. The tiger that cannot predict where the deer is going to appear is going to go hungry. The deer that cannot predict where the tiger is going to appear is going to get eaten. That's an animal existence. Most human beings live life no different than the deer and the tiger, constantly figuring out, constantly in alert, constantly anxious, constantly oscillating between supplication and aggression to manage the unpredictableness of life. What I teach people is, I call this kind of existence that I just described to you a consumer's life, where you sit at the table of life and you're waiting for the meal to be given and you're hoping and praying that today the waiter is going to come with something delightful to your table and not some crap that he's going to slop onto your table. All right. You have no ability to determine what gets put on your table. You have no ability to change it. And not only that, you have no ability to enjoy what is given to you. All right. That is the fate of 99% of the humanity. Consider, for example, a person who begins to realize that it is he who determines the outcome of his life. He may not determine what comes before him, but he determines how he experiences it. There are two aspects to you and me. We both have an ability to be perceptive of the experience of life as it comes. And then that is what we call as our awareness. And the other aspect is our ability to make a story about it, a narrative, an interpretation, a relative value judgment, a preference, a distaste, a revulsion, or an attraction. And we use these stories to determine the experience of our life. But if you develop the ability to stand in just the awareness, and you can choose which judgment you want to pick and choose as the driving narrative of your day, you can decide how you experience whatever comes to your table. Most people don't have mastery over that. That's what I teach.
I made a note here, Doc, and you said most people, about 99%, go through life where it's an accidental life. They're waiting for something to happen. They're waiting for somebody to feed them. They're waiting for somebody to take care of them, whatever. Versus a life of abundance that we all can have if we embrace that, because there's so much out there. I love that. And that is wow. That is just universal. Love it.
So what I'm saying is not new stuff. It's ancient stuff. It's the stuff that's written in the good books of all theologies. I don't care whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity. When David sings in the Psalm of the Shepherd, the Psalm of David, "The Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want," he is speaking of the state, a state of abundance where he has had an intimate experience of himself as a master of how he experiences the world around him. And he attributes it to the grace of the Lord, that ability to experience it. But nevertheless, when he says, he laid the table before me, before my enemies, that's exactly what he's saying. It's a phraseology and a language of a different time and a different ethos, but the experience is the same. It comes out of the same root.
A lot of sense. I love what you're teaching, because it's a principle, and you're right. Every major religion in the world preaches abundance.
Yeah.
But you got to do something. You just can't be lazy. I don't mean just lazy in work, but lazy in attitude.
Yes. And once you acquire that, once the light goes on once, then you know that forever you don't have to have darkness. And even if it gets dark again, you know that you have the ability to switch on the light.
Let's talk about your books a little bit. The first title that really grabbed me is Squirrels in My Brain.
Oh, that was the third book. The first book was The Reaper's Dance. I wrote that during the COVID pandemic to describe our journey during the pandemic and my own analysis of the pandemic and in the larger context in which it was occurring. And I wrote that book also to demonstrate to people that we were extraordinarily successful in maintaining a sense of balance during the pandemic. And we were able to conduct our community through it safely. And I felt that all the chaos of the pandemic need not have happened. I felt that we could have done a better job, and I felt that somebody needs to describe what we did in the clinic and how we negotiated our way through it. That story I wanted to say so that people can have a roadmap for the future, because I also felt that there will be other pandemics. So after that, I started speaking. I started talking about the book in podcasts and all that. Then I decided that I needed to take my message of focus, connection, and community to the TED stage. And I went on to the TED stage. And then I wrote a book about how I journeyed to the TED stage. And that was The Art of Viral Speaking. And the first TED talk that I gave was in October in Gary, Indiana. That became viral. It is right now a little over 1.5 million views in less than 90 days. So it's definitely up there. Then that talk gave rise to the connection talk that I gave in University of Missouri, Kansas City Medical Center on February 1st. And then I'm going to give the community talk on March 14th in Winchester, Virginia, TEDx in Hanley Boulevard, Winchester, Virginia. So those are the three TEDx's that came out of those three talks. And the third book, Squirrels in My Brain, I have Asperger's and mild Asperger's and ADHD. And Squirrels in My Brain came out of my journey through confusion to clarity in handling my own way in which my neuronal brain, and I decided that I would write a book, and two students came to my clinic. They also wanted to be engaged in some project, so the three of us sat and wrote it out, and that is the book that just is going to come out on March 1st, on March 3rd, I think. It's going to come out. It's on pre-order in Amazon. Squirrels in My Brain, How to Create Neuro-Aligned Teams. And so the concept of neuro-alignment is the course that I conduct. It's called Cognitive Alignment Workshop or CoGAL Workshop. And I have a course called Strategies of Neuro-Aligned Groups, or STRONG, STRONG. And these two presented in varying formats, either as a 90-minute or a 180-minute talk, and the weekend course is what I do with groups, companies, and so on and so forth. And it's a pretty powerful, intense program. People come out of it challenged deeply, and they come out very transformed, is to put it mildly. Yeah.
So let's backtrack for a minute. Okay, before we forget, so all three books you mentioned, Amazon, best source?
Yeah. Amazon.
And the new...
I have no patience to deal with publishers. I just go on Amazon, publish it, and then, because the only thing a publisher does these days is market. And nowadays, if you don't have your own following, they don't market you anyway. So I have no interest in paying a publisher $30,000 to publish a book when I can just go on Amazon and eventually I'm going to market it myself. Forget it.
I'm with you. I did 4 of them in my...
Yeah.
I paid a lot of money, and then I realized I could do it myself.
Yeah.
And frankly, even with podcasts, I started out with a podcast company, nice people. But at the end of the day, I said, you know what? All they really are doing is sticking it on YouTube. I can do that myself. And now with publishing,
Yes.
so many things you can publish.
Yeah. The key to publishing is not writing the book. The key to publishing is marketing. People need to understand that from the get-go, and people don't, they deliberately hide the marketing away from people. What you really need to do before you write a book is you need to start developing a marketing plan before you even write your first line.
Agreed. So let's come back for a minute, Doctor, because I love what you said here. Let's just talk about it as an individual, because our listeners, some of them run companies, some of them own large companies, some of them a lot of them are in the direct selling industry. They work for themselves, be it part-time or full-time. I've also got a fairly big following from the insurance industry, some realtors, people who generally work for themselves, be it part-time or full-time. And these 3 things you're talking about are so key. And you know that. I'm not telling you this is your information, but I love what you said, because when you're self-employed, hardest thing is the F word, focus. There's so many other things and noise and social media and life going on. And if somebody says, I've got a limited amount of time per week, I've got 10 hours a week I can put into my side hustle, my side gig, my side business, whatever you want to call it, whatever they're doing, whether they're selling something, making something, whatever it happens to be. How can people focus better?
Okay. So the first thing I talked about focus is when you look at Mount Everest, you don't ever look at the whole mountain, ever. Look at only the 5 feet, 10 feet in front of you. That's all. you get to the base camp at Mount Everest and you look up the mountain and you say, okay, that's my route, and that's it. That's the only time you end up looking at the mountain. From that point onwards, all you do is you look at the first 5 feet or the 10 feet in front of you. So there's something that I teach people called the creator's hour. This is given to all of us as human beings. There's a 96-minute period that begins 96 minutes before sunrise every day. During these 96 minutes before sunrise, your entire neuroendocrine system is at optimal harmony. And it is linked to the sunrise-sunset cycle. So your entire hormonal system, your entire brain networks, everything is in perfect sync for these 96 minutes before sunrise. It's called the creator's hour. In India, in Sanskrit, it's called Brahma Muhurtam, which is basically Brahma is the creator and Muhurtam means auspicious time. It is called the holy hour of the creator, basically. Essentially, I don't want to get into the holy part, the creator's hour. So 96 minutes before sunrise. So I set my alarm clock to 2 hours before sunrise. All right. So the creator's hour begins for 96 minutes before sunrise. I wake up 2 hours before sunrise. All right. And that's 130 minutes before the creator's hour begins. And when I get up, I swing my feet off the floor, off the bed, and I put it on the floor, and I press with my feet down into the floor. I want to feel my floor under my feet. I want to feel grounded. There's a power in that. And it's a conscious effort. It's a conscious ritual that I do. And I'm internally rooting myself, grounding myself with the earth beneath me. That's one. It may sound nonsensical, but it's a ritual that's really powerful. You just do it, you feel grounded. Then I take my hand and I rub my face like this 3 times. Right? My hands are my organs of action. All right. My tongue and my sense of smell, my taste and tongue, these are all organs of action. My eyes and ears are my organs of perception. My speech is my organ of action. So I put all these things, my tools of how I'm going to interact my next 24 hours of my day. I get myself grounded. Before I begin my creator's hour, I make sure that all my tools are functioning. I take my toolbox out, my hands, my speech, my sense of smell, my sense of hearing, my sense of eyes. These are the tools with which I will interact with life. Then I go to the bathroom, I shave, shower, void myself, get ready. I'm out in half an hour. My creator's hour begins. I'm at 96 minutes before sunrise. Then the creator's hour is not a full hour. It's actually only 48 minutes. But it begins 96 minutes before sunrise and it ends 48 minutes before sunrise. So I wake up half an hour before the creator's hour, start the creator's hour, and during those 48 minutes, I write and I answer 3 questions. I decide, how am I going to contribute to my wife today? I decide, how am I going to contribute to my staff today? And then I decide, how am I going to contribute to the world today? That's it. No other goals of my life. Just these 3 goals. Then at 48 minutes before sunrise, I get up, I make my breakfast, I have my coffee. I'm already ready, I'm already dressed, ready for work. and I leave for work. That's it. And I don't look back after that. No more ambiguity, no more doubts, everything. Then I let life present to me the way it is, whatever upsets, whatever comes. But I make sure that I finish my day with doing those three things that I decided. And each day I decide for that day, how am I going to contribute these three things? And then I move on. So that's a basic ritual. So I believe that everyone needs to cultivate some kind of ritual for themselves in the early morning hours before they start. I also believe that it's enormously powerful to wake up before sunrise. Typically, that means sunrise fluctuates in my area from between as early as 5:30 to as late as 7. So I'm up as early as 3:30 to as late as 5, depending on the time of the year. So every day I decide what is going to be my wake up time the next day based on the next day's sunrise.
I have to ask you a couple questions on that. I'm like yourself. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I mean,
Yeah.
very young, since college. Started my first business in college 40 plus years ago. And I've always thought, I put a term on that as the entrepreneur's brain, because I talk to entrepreneurs and it's.
There are people who call it the 5 a.m., the 5 a.m. club or something like that. But essentially it all falls into the same pattern.
But is there a reason for that? What I find is, and like yourself, I'm up early. By the way, I find just about everybody successful I talk to is up, like you say.
Yeah.
I'm back from the gym, it's still dark.
Exactly, yes.
Look at this getting up at 8 o'clock stuff.
I have done about 3 to 4 hours of work before my staff rolls into the clinic. So most people who are successful are like that. The creator's hour is not a myth, it is a real thing. Our body runs on the sunrise sunset cycle. Our hormonal, there's a circadian rhythm, there's a cycle, a rise and fall of our hormones and a rise and fall of our neuronal activity. All our biological processes run along a soul. Functioning and optimizing your activities in sync with that cycle makes you enormously powerful. Because otherwise, what you are doing is you are trying to swim against the current of life. Why? Life is hard enough as it is. Why do you want to make it more harder?
Let's go to the other side of that. So the circadian rhythm that you just mentioned. I know in Ayurvedic tradition, going to bed, the sooner the better, but to put a time, let's put a time on it. Let's say between 9 and 10 for most people, depending on where they live, what they're doing, not burning the candle at both ends.
Yes.
And what's your suggestion on that?
Like I typically go to bed around 8:30 to 9. I don't stay up later than that if I can manage. And then I'll wake up at 3:30, 4 in the morning and I'm ready. Because what I feel is, let's say I had something really important to do at 8:30 and I'm tempted to stay on for another hour and a half. I'll actually know I will stop doing it and go to bed at 9 o'clock, 9:30 and wake up early and pick it up at that time and do it at that time. So I find myself, so the ability to terminate an action when you are tempted to drag it on has enormous power. It gives you power. It gives you more control. And the ability to resume that action at another time where on your terms gives you power again. So you win at both ends of the game. So these are simple techniques. They're not rocket science, but they're extremely powerful strategies that anybody can use. And you start adding small such strategies, and you'll build an enormous monument very quickly with it.
You think that the from you understand the brain obviously much better than I do, or much better than probably most of our listeners, but you think there's like almost like an on switch that goes on in that creator's hour where it's like God or whatever you believe in says, come on, get your butt up, let's go.
I'll tell you one thing. I'll be honest with you. I do believe in a higher power, but I'm not, I use the principle before, before I can ascribe a higher power, I have to exist first to be even aware of the existence of a higher power.
Mm.
So the important thing for me is this instrument that I have, am I operating it optimally according to the operating manual that has been designed for it? Because if I have the human body is phenomenally powerful. People, we are operating at less than 0.1% of our efficiency on power most of the time. If you develop the ability to just pick up a job whenever you want, drop it whenever you want, and then pick it up again without interruption and start without any hesitation at where you will drop it off, you become enormously powerful. You can take on multiple tasks, do something perfectly for about 15 minutes, drop it, and go do something else, and then come back and pick it up exactly where you did. And then without resonance, without any undue repetitive thinking about, oh, I should have done that, I should have done that, nothing of that sort. Every action is done and when you stop doing it, there is no further thought about it. You go do another one. That's the kind of clarity I'm talking about.
Yep. So, doctor, just in wrapping up, how do people get in touch with you? How can they get your seminars? Can they get them online, or are they all live, or how do they
Yeah, I will shoot you an email. Let me get your, what's your email?
It's, for this, send it to my assistant. It's Joe
J-O,
David, like the man's name,
Joe David 1
at SBC, Sam
at
Bob Charles Global.net.
S
BC. S for Sam, B for boy, C for Charles.
SBC Global.
.net. And also, I do need a headshot, by the way. I know we're still talking live on the camera here, folks. This is the stuff.
That's okay. I'll give it to you.
Oh, wait, you do two things at once, right? We do get up to a certain age. It's tell me everything to do at once, because if you tell me twice, I'll forget the second one.
Joe David at sbcglobal.net. I'll send it to you.
Joe David 1. Make sure the one's in there.
Joe David 1.
Right.
I got it.
And put the headshot in. But Doc, this has been a privilege. And
my people can get in touch with me at www.D as in David, R as in Robert, I as in India, Y as in yellow, E as in Emily, R as in Robert.com, driyer.com. And if you go to that website, you'll see everything I do. That's an umbrella website. And you can book me for your event and shoot me an email, and it's easy.
The word change specialist comes to mind, that organizational change specialist.
Yes.
So many organizations need what you described, and we all, as individuals, we all need it, obviously. But
everyone needs it at some point or the other. Almost everyone needs it at more than one point in their life, again and again. What happens is we change, we get better at something, and then we plateau. And when we lose our ability to improve and we remain static at a state, then something comes on that points us that whatever we are doing is no longer sufficient. We now have to acquire a new set of skills, and whatever skills brought us to this point of success cannot take us on to tomorrow. And we have to abandon that and acquire completely. So we are continually, everyone is continually impelled to reinvent themselves. And to the extent that you are able to reinvent yourself, you are able to grow. To the extent that you fail in that task, you will die. So that is the nature of life. Life demands that you grow. It's either you grow or you decay. There's no other. It's a very binary option given to us. You don't have any other than that. And if you're not able to grow, then you will die. That's just the way it is.
It's funny, 'cause I did an interview earlier today with someone like yourself in the medical field. And I said, I'll be 64 here in a couple months. And I said, my list of,
I'm over 3 years older to you.
and I know you're the same way, because I look at all the projects you're involved with.
Yeah.
My list is growing of the
Yes.
things that I need to do, want to do. And I talked to some people I went to high school with, and they're retired, and it's
Yeah, exactly.
why are you wasting this? You're only here once. Like, why are you wasting time not doing projects and growing, and especially today with all of this technology and all the ability to do all these wonderful things from home if you want.
Yeah.
Crazy. So,
I'm having the time of my life. This is the best time. People ask me all the time.
I love getting up in the morning and getting at it, and but about 9 o'clock to that point, about 9 o'clock, that's it. But boy, all day I got multiple tasks that I'm doing, and I'm enjoying the challenge of the things I don't know how to do, but also the wisdom of the things I do know how to do, doing them to the best of my ability still. So, Doctor, this has been a privilege, my friend, and I look forward to staying in touch and continuing.
Oh, definitely. I want to ask you something once we go offline. So let me know.
Yes, hang on, and we'll be right there. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check back weekly for more exciting episodes. And don't miss Ink and Insight every Wednesday, where we celebrate iconic authors and dive into their impactful works.